All right, so we are rolling with it. I am not wasting time getting from episode to episode because it is just starting to get good. I explained in the last one all about the Crumb Boss years, how it started, how it ended, and why it ended. And now we're at episode 8. So if you haven't been catching up with this Bakery Storytime series, you may want to go all the way back to episode 1. And because I'm trying to keep it in fairly logical order, it's just so much to remember and keep it clear so that you guys can hang with me. But anyway, yeah, Crumb Boss years just ended. Why did it end? Looking back on it, I recall just being really overwhelmed with it all. The bakery life just never stopped being a major challenge at every turn. The long hours at the bakery, like 7 days a week, plus now I'm building another business on top of it. And it was just turning out to be all so draining. So although being the Crumb Boss was really fun and it brought back my passion for baking, which, as we all know, the bakery business was sucking out of me daily. I had my new relationship that seemed so promising, and by the end of 2013, it was circling the drain. Remember, what I wanted my whole life, maybe even more than a bakery, was a husband, and this one seemed to be the one when we met in early 2011. But as far as that whole thing was concerned, I really should have seen the red flags on that one in the very beginning, and even throughout the first year when he told me he just doesn't have time for a girlfriend. So then why did he want one and pursue having one? Not to mention some other suspect things that happened early on with him and, you know, like other women sort of thing. So I always just seem to give him a pass on everything because, well, I want what I want. I can own that. Nothing has changed for me at this point. No different than buying the bakery, really. I just can never see all the things that are wrong. I just always want to see all the things that are right, or possibly could be right. So once I moved into this new rental after losing my house in the beginning of 2012, I had expectations that he would move in with me and then we would just start our life together. After all, we'd been together for over 2 years at that point. But instead, around this time, it was made very clear to me that he did not want the same things that I wanted. He straight up told me that he didn't want the burden of paying rent because, yeah, he was still living at home with his parents, which, don't get me wrong, totally fine. I mean, if that's what you want to do, go for it. But you know, I guess I should have said, okay, see you later, and moved on to find somebody who did want the same things that I wanted. The one thing that we both agreed on, though, was that neither one of us wanted to be the one to end it. So if I could be honest, I mean, 2012 is when this relationship really should have broke off, but it didn't. I have a tendency to stay too long in things that just don't feel good for me, with, I think, the hopes that I can change it or fix it, or I don't know, maybe I just have a hard time walking away from things that I've invested myself in so deeply. So, but also add to all of this going on in my personal life, the cost of the bakery business after all of those renovations, equipment upgrades, not to mention rent increases at like 3 or 4% a year for the last 8 years, because now we're in year 8. The ingredients cost by 2013 had been risen unbelievably. But I do think at this time I was at least getting $15 for a birthday cake. So it was at this time that my partner in the bakery and I had to really just be honest that this business is not supporting the both of us. You know, it was really different when Mario was there because it was he and his wife. So that's 2 incomes going to one household. But for us, these small paychecks that Drew and I were relying on weekly, with hopes that holidays would bring us in some extra, it just wasn't enough. And now, with all the added loans and the general business costs constantly going up, any extra was going out to pay for that and definitely not going to us. So at first it was decided that I was going to leave the bakery, and I started yet another business plan for a spin-off bakery based around my YouTube channel. And we talked about doing a buyout, but then Drew decided that he wanted to leave instead. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll stay. And we got that deal going. Now, it is worth mentioning here that all the Crumb Boss videos for the last 2 years were being done on the bakery dime, like all the ingredients, all the videos, the lights on, the oven running for an additional 5 hours every Saturday. This is going to become important soon because once I transferred over to the Woodland Bakery Blog TV with Jason after Stephanie and I split, the cost to run this second business was still being absorbed by the bakery. Like Crumb Boss and subsequently the WWB had zero overhead because my poor little bakery was paying for everything. So first of all, that was not fair to Drew as my partner in the bakery to be footing the bill for my second business that he had nothing to do with outside partners. And technically it wasn't fair to me either, since these were two separate businesses and should have been separated out from the beginning. And second of all, no one but me realized the actual cost of all of this. Like, had we needed to rent a studio to film and buy all of our own ingredients to execute these videos, like, you know, that's a lot of money. But I never really said anything about it, but very soon that would become a reality, since once I sold the bakery, Jason and I did have to go and get a studio to film in, and now suddenly there's rent and utilities and internet fees and initial equipment and a studio set to build. Don't forget opening inventory for all the ingredients and more. But I am getting a little bit ahead, and you know, I'm trying not to be too disjointed in my telling of this, since everything at this time just really seemed like it was happening all at once. Like, I've got the boyfriend thing going on. I just lost my house. There's a pending buyout of my partner in the bakery, the falling apart of Crumb Boss, and now a new partnership with Jason. Like, it's just like this is all happening at the end of 2012 into the beginning of 13. So, oh, and if you haven't listened to episode 1 of this series about my midnight baker and all of those shenanigans, that was also about to start happening right around this time as well. Can you say overwhelming? So, okay, catching up to the last episode, Stephanie and I cut ties, we dissolved the business, and after just a couple of months, Jason talked me into continuing with him. And I think I mentioned that in the last one, is that I didn't really have intentions to start this all over again and keep going. And the whole way that Jason even came into the picture, I mentioned in the last episode, was that Stephanie and I hired him to do like the e-commerce part of it that we were trying to build together. So, you know, he and I ended up speaking pretty often because he was helping me build the actual Crumb Boss database, like the website. And so he and I like had to really work closely on the phone to sort of execute all of that. Like, that's the reason that we hired him. I think he saw the potential of what this business could really be, you know, not just from like a YouTube standpoint, but from an e-commerce standpoint. And so obviously I did. I thought it was, you know, a good idea. And don't forget, I still wanted an exit strategy out of this bakery, even though I just bought my partner out. Like, I just didn't see me there for the long haul. You know what I mean? Even if it was like another 5 or 10 years, I knew that would be my max. Little did I know it was only going to be 1 more year. So I just remember being really nervous to film with him like the first couple of times, you know, because how do you really just replace such a big personality like Stephanie was? But surprisingly, it went off without a hitch, and somehow everyone found us pretty easily, even though the entire previous Crumb Boss channel had to be restarted from zero. So I'm going to call it the WWB, it's the WBB, the Woodland Bakery Blog TV channel. I'm going to just call it the WBB. It really did start gaining speed, actually even faster than the Crumb Boss channel had. And, you know, the nice thing about it was that Jason stayed out of my business as far as creating the recipes and steering the videos, and I had no clue as to what he was doing on the back end. All I knew was that it was working and it was gaining speed really fast and the viewers really liked it. And we were starting to make close to like $3,000 a month with no overhead, because remember, the bakery was still paying for everything. But again, splitting $3,000 a month between two people, while that's a nice chunk of extra pocket change, it was still not much in terms of making this a full-time gig. But between Jason's expertise in knowing how to monetize the website, the YouTube videos were getting tons of views, and we started selling cake kits again. And this time, I was writing ebooks until the wee hours of the night after my bakery shift. And once we started selling those, it was game on. So again, Jason was an e-commerce guy and he knew how to make money online. And he and I both really wanted this to be both of our exit strategies, not only for me from the bakery, but he also wanted to leave his job and make this his full-time job. And it definitely looked possible since we weren't just relying on YouTube and that measly ad revenue. So it was all very exciting, but all of this at the same time, I'm now the sole owner of Woodland Bakery. I took on yet another loan to buy out my partner, and then I did another renovation on the storefront. So this was shortly after the episode 1 debacle that I talked about in my Storytime in the Bakery series. And so when I reopened the bakery after that 2-week renovation, I no longer have a baker. I have no partner, and I also lived almost 40 minutes away from the bakery. And so I needed to move again to be closer, since I knew now that I was going to be the one starting at 3 a.m. until I could find another baker. So I guess I have this weird habit of piling on so much that I can't even see the plate anymore, and I wonder why I end up vomiting all over the place when it all becomes too much. But anyway, Jason and I are still filming. But I think this time we ended up doing Friday nights instead of Saturday, because Jason would just show up after his work day and then we would film on Friday nights for like 4 or 5 hours. So I know I'm jumping around a lot because I'm going from Jason and I with the videos and then jumping back to what was happening in my actual bakery. But right around this same time, it was like maybe a week after I reopened the bakery after the renovation. So it's September of 2013. And this was the ultimate last straw. And after this happened, I put the bakery up for sale like the next day. I was standing in my little area just behind the store part that was like partitioned by a wall. So this was like my office and cake decorating area because it was air conditioned. And then just before you would walk into the kitchen section through that swinging door. So I'm standing there talking to Alyssa, my store manager, just one afternoon, and suddenly all the shelves fell off the walls, like literally broke free from the studs that they were nailed into, and everything crashed to the floor around me. We both just stood there in shock amidst a pile of rubble, looking at each other like, WTF, what just happened? And actually, I remember laughing. I just started laughing like hysterical, because what else could I do at that point? I had always said that the bakery was built on an old Indian burial ground with all the ridiculous stuff that happened over the years. But this was complete validation that it was, and also validation that I was done. Toasted. The end. I quit. I listed the bakery for sale the next day with a broker, which turned out to be a nightmare in and of itself. And I paid him a lot of money to try to sell it. Like, not a lot of money, but it was like a few $1,000s to try to sell it. And after a couple of months of paying him and not getting anywhere with it, I got out of that contract. And then I just tried selling it by myself through word of mouth. And I think I listed it on Craigslist too. And meanwhile, now we're gearing up for the upcoming Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday. And I have no baker. My bakery is still falling apart around me. I'm absolutely to my limit with just the amount of hours that I'm putting in. So yeah, you could say I was kind of sort of freaking out trying to figure out how I was going to do all of this. I've never wanted to run away from something so bad. Like basically everything that my life had become at this point, I just wanted to be far, far away from. I was getting very depressed, And I was just really operating on autopilot. Like, it was time to make the donuts. Every day at 3 o'clock, I would just kind of roll out and I would work until, I want to say like 10 o'clock. And then I would go back to my new terrible house rental, which is a story in itself, like the worst place I've ever lived in my entire life. So add that on to spiraling depression. I would sleep for a couple hours and then I would go back into work through the afternoon and then stay there and close the store until 6, set up for the next day. And then somehow on Fridays, I would muster up the energy to film videos all night long. Of course, I stopped going to the gym because there's not enough hours in the day. I went back to eating whole cheesecakes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and my total self-care just went right out the window. So yeah, that's what a spiral into depression looks like, if anybody's ever wondered. But somehow another angel descended into my life, and one day in early October, or maybe it was late October, I can't really remember, I got a phone call from a semi-retired baker who asked me if I needed any help for the upcoming holidays. Oh my God, can you say godsend? Introducing Greg, my next baker, who literally saved my from disaster and mental breakdown that was definitely starting to show. So I have nothing but great things to say about him. A fantastic old school baker who basically came in and started running my kitchen like it was nothing. He was just so fantastic. It turns out though, and I didn't know this right away, but he was actually looking to buy a bakery, and most likely he saw my listing on Craigslist, and what better way to see if you want to buy a bakery than to immerse yourself in it as an employee. Pretty sneaky there, Gregory. So of course I didn't know this right away, but it like whatever at that point. But I did open up to him right away about everything that I was going through and the fact that I was looking to sell it. And he was definitely interested in buying it, but he just didn't have the cash flow yet to do so. I think he was waiting on some money to come through and then he'd be able to buy it, but there was no set date as to when that would happen, and I was spinning my wheels. So while I wanted it to be him, he was like the perfect fit to take over that bakery. But as time went by, I just couldn't wait any longer. I was like a caged animal in every aspect of my life, and I wanted out of all of it. Well, except for the Woodland Bakery blog TV part, which I did still really love. And of course, that was my exit strategy. Like that was what I was going to do next. So normally I would cut it off here because this is already going pretty long, but man, there is more. So I'm going to keep going on this one, and this one's going to go pretty lengthy. But okay, at this same time, like we're at the start of the holidays, it's right around when Greg showed up. I also put the word out via my Facebook page that I needed help in the store for a busy season coming up. So an acquaintance I knew from the gym hit me up saying she would love to come work in the bakery part-time for the season. So I hired her right away. Now, I also confided in her. I mean, we were like kind of friends. And so I told her that I had the bakery for sale. And after a couple of months of her working there, she told me she wanted to buy it. I mean, I remember just laughing in her face, like not like as a jerk, but like I didn't take her seriously because she had zero experience of baking, first of all, and had never owned a business. Like never baked professionally and had never really had experience owning a big business like mine. Like, you know, I had a lot of employees. It was a big business. So, but she was dead serious. She really wanted to buy my bakery. And I really wanted to sell my bakery. So together we brewed up a perfect storm. And so when the talks got serious, like she was actually looking for the funding in every way possible to buy this bakery, I started to take her under my wing. I let her in on every aspect of the books, the inner workings of everything in the bakery, and I even set out to teach her how to bake. Well, at least the very basics of what she would need to know to run the bakery. I mean, honestly, at that point, I had a really great staff now that Greg was there. And, you know, 2 of my key employees, one was still there from Mario days, and another one who came on at the beginning of 2013. And these two were just like my MVPs with Greg. Like, it was literally just the four of us now running every single part of that bakery kitchen. So yeah, finally, after almost 10 years being in the bakery, I had a really strong staff. But things could change at any time, and as the owner of your business, you better know how to jump into someone else's shoes at a moment's notice. So it was imperative for her to learn how to do like all the tasks, and most importantly was how to bake the stuff, how to make the recipes and bake everything. So I remember the first night, or morning I should say, I had her go in with me at 3 a.m. and this way I could teach her all of this, and we would have to do it like a number of times. But I remember like the first night that we did it, she didn't really pay attention too much. Like, she wasn't really like that closely looking at what I was doing. It didn't seem like she was really paying too much attention about what I was telling her. And although like I kept trying to say, hey, like you really have to see this and touch this and feel this. There's no set times for proofing doughs and danishes and all of this stuff. Like, you just kind of have to know it. You can't just rely on a piece of paper, but like basically saying, get in here, start touching this stuff, like learn this. And so by 6:30 is when the store would open, and everything was, finished and iced up and had their glaze on it, and the store was packed and ready for opening. I remember she said, I'll never do this. I'll never come in at 3 o'clock to do this. I'll make sure I always have a baker because I won't do this. And I was just like, I remember how I always ignore the red flags, but I wanted out so bad at this point that this flag could have wrapped me up and wrestled me to the ground and beat the boop out of me, and I was still not letting go of my need to get out of this bakery. So for about 6 months, I continued to show her everything that I did on a daily basis, from the specific recipes that only I knew how to make, to the banking and the payroll, because ultimately she was going to be replacing me. I mean, honestly, if she just kept everything the same, let all the existing employees stay on and do their jobs like we did in the beginning, it would have been an easy transition. I mean, we didn't start weeding out our staff until at the very least 6 months into it. I mean, we just sat back and watched how everything played out and who did what and where we could do things better. And I mean, that is the smartest thing to do when you're taking over an existing business. You've just got to be patient and see why this place is successful in the first place. I mean, this was not like the nightmare scenario that I walked into in 2005. Like, she had all new equipment, a crackerjack staff, great store employees with a really great store manager that I had trained up since she was in high school, still working there with me. And everyone wanted to stay on. The bakery was a great business. Despite all the loans that she was taking over, it was still a really great business and way better than the day I took it over 10 years earlier. So finally, by September of 2014, we did the deal. I finally sold the bakery. Oh my God, free at last, free at last. And Jason and I were on our way into the studio apartment that I found for us that was halfway between me in New Jersey and halfway between him in upstate New York. I found the most awesome apartment rental in Sussex, New Jersey. Like, it was so unique and just really cool. And with my savings, like my personal savings and some money from the sale of the bakery, I was able to furnish it by opening inventory, put down all the securities and the deposits, and get internet and utilities. And yeah, why was I doing all that? 50-50 partners, right? Red flags all over the dang place. I must be colorblind. So I had been, even before leaving the bakery, warning Jason that once we left this bakery, we were going to be in for a shock to the system once we had to start paying for all of this stuff ourselves. But he, like me, we did have the utmost faith in the business that we were building, And, you know, we just saw that once we could really focus on it like more full time than just on a Friday night, that it had to just get better. So I would basically go in there in the morning and prep recipes all day and get ready for filming in the evening. And he was still working his job, so he would have to show up in the evening. I think we were doing it just like a couple of times a week. And yeah, we were back to business as usual. We actually had our best months ever for November and December as newly filming in the studio. But one thing to understand about a food blog and YouTube channel that revolves around food is that it's no different than the actual bakery business. It's really busy for the holidays, and then it really slows down when it's not the holidays. So we had some major dips in revenue in the slower months, just like my bakery did, where the revenue was actually not enough to pay for all the bills that we now had. And once again, I was dipping into my savings to pay for everything, which is not what happens in a 50-50 partnership. Like when Drew and I had the bakery and we weren't making enough money to pay the bills, we didn't take paychecks. So this became a really big problem, and the expectation that I was supposed to somehow keep using my own money to pay for everything, including his salary, if you can believe it, really was like, that was the end of it for me. I was like, well, I can't do this. Like, I can't and shouldn't have to do this. Now, I don't want to go into the gory details about this whole time, but let's just say it got really ugly. My access to the website was shut down. And so, I mean, I ended up calling my lawyer, and then it began. I will say here, though, I want to just say before I go any further that although the split was bad, Jason and I did also end up reconciling in 2017 after just a few years of not speaking. And this really ugly lawsuit that basically went nowhere because you can't sue someone if there's nothing to sue for. Like, the business wasn't worth anything, so you can't put a value on something that's making nothing. You know, I mean, like $3,000 a month, if that, you know, that's not even Judge Judy status. So anyway, he actually reached out to me in 2017 with a very nice email and took responsibility for his part in the whole thing. And, you know, that takes a big person. So naturally, I let bygones be bygones, and a huge lesson was learned. But, you know, it does take two people, and I don't know. So needless to say, the lawyers made out like bandits, and I spent almost half of the money I got from the sale of that bakery, which wasn't a lot to begin with because I had so much debt on the bakery. I didn't really get too much money. I basically sold the debt. And I don't even recall the full amount of what I got, but it was not even close to $75,000. And then spending half of that on lawyers, well, yeah, you do the math. So now I walk away with nothing, a shut down website and YouTube channel with barely enough money to keep me afloat for a year as a single person living in New Jersey. I'm still hanging on to a boyfriend that refuses to leave his mother's house. Like, what do I do now? And this is when I decided to move to Florida. So I think I'm going to end this one here because this could go on for like another 20 minutes, and I don't really know how much you guys are watching through to the end. I mean, when I look at my analytics, I have a retention on these 20-minute videos of like 6 minutes, which it's kind of like, how do you leave after 6 minutes? It's just getting good. So I definitely would love to hear your comments down below on what you think of all of this storytime stuff. I mean, I'll continue it if people want to still listen to it, because I would really love to get up to speed to where I am today in my life. The life and times of Gretchen's Vegan Bakery. I mean, that whole thing needs to be talked about, how I transitioned and why I did. And oh man, my life is so crazy. So anyway, give me a comment below. Let me know what you think. We're going to pick it up on the next one with my move to Florida and the transition from First of all, Crumb Boss, Woodland Bakery blog, to now Gretchen's Bakery, my first solo business, no partners, since the best advice I ever got was, the only thing a partner is good for is dancing. But once again, I'm skipping over some of the things that were also going on at the time that I was in this legal battle with Jason. The girl that I sold the bakery to was also now trying to sue me for continuing to use the Woodland Bakery name. So yeah, there's a lot to continue talking about, but I do want to wrap it up here because I have to bring yet another cat to the vet this afternoon. It seems like all 4 of my cats are now passing an upper respiratory infection to one another. So it's been nothing but vets and emergency animal hospitals for a week, and it's just not stopping. So I'm going to end this here. We'll pick it up again really soon. I need to continue this story. And until then, happy vegan baking. Bye for now.